I'm sure you can think of additional behavioral scaffolds, strategies, and ways that they've worked and ways that they haven't worked. Again, it's important to note the importance of fading those gradually and monitoring student responding and student progress to ensure that they're not being faded too quickly or being faded or not being faded at all. And so having the child become prompt dependent. So finally, I definitely want to discuss social emotional strategies and scaffolding social emotional learning. Vygotsky's social cultural view of learning is definitely central to many new ideas of motivation and motivation as emerging from the social context. And so this really highlights that motivation is sort of built into the student's attitude and values within social practices in the classroom. And so what this implies, or the implication of this, is that social and emotional aspects of learning are deeply rooted within the classroom's social and cultural practices. And so even though scaffolding strategies are more thought of as a way to help students through instructional or academic tasks, they have the potential to also inform effective learning within students. And so we're going to review really quickly 3 strategies, which are social stories, daily social circle, and lift-ups. Some skills that could be targeted to improve personal well-being and interpersonal relationships within social emotional learning are being aware of one's own emotions, being able to self-regulate, and being empathetic to others. And so these are things that, in thinking of these things and how we can potentially facilitate learning and improving in these areas within the classroom, we sort of aligned 3 specific strategies to help with that in the classroom. So as far as social stories go, they're a social learning tool that support the safe and meaningful exchange of information. So in essence, the way I picture and see social stories is sort of a self-published little story that you use with students within the classroom. It targets sort of different skills within different contexts. I've used social stories myself to help with potty training, as well as to help students initiate social interactions with other students. So in essence, you sort of go through explaining to the child, when this happens, this happens. So in essence, when I go outside, I really want to play, and it's important that I try to interact with other children. One way that I could interact with other children is by approaching them, tapping them on the shoulder, and asking if I can play. And so that's one example of how to use social stories within the classroom. This really describes a context, a skill, and sort of the concept, while also modeling appropriate responses in various contexts. An additional strategy is daily social circles, and this can be done for 5 minutes at the very beginning of the day. In essence, the teacher is modeling how to appropriately describe and name how they feel, and so they simply provide their name. So my name is Annie, and I feel excited because we're halfway through the week. And so that's just an example of something that the teachers can do going around the circle. Not every child has to participate if they don't want to, but it's a very good way to practice communication and social skills and to emphasize being able to be aware of one's own emotions. And then finally, lift-ups. I think lift-ups are a great idea, not just for kiddos within the classroom, but even for adults. So these are really just ways of providing shout-outs to the kiddos and sort of recognizing their social skills and recognizing the ways in which they've helped around the classroom. And teachers can also model this. It can be verbally said, or it can also be written down in little notes that can be read at the end of the day. But they really just show appreciation to others. It helps students build positive relationships, and it promotes the value of caring and of inclusion. Some resources for social emotional scaffolding strategies. are, that top one is a study that really reviews quite a few social emotional strategies. So I really recommend looking into that study. The other two are websites. The second one is additional information on social stories at carolgracesocialstories.com. And then the last one is templates for creating social stories, and that one is in autismspeaks.org. Again, there are plethora of other social emotional scaffolding strategies that could be used. Perhaps you've used some within your own classroom that you see were helpful. And so these were just a few of the many that could be used within the classroom. So finally, I think it's very important that we talk about sort of fading scaffolds, and we sort of hit on this a little bit when we were talking about prompts, but then also discussing gradual release, which I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with. And it's in essence what fading the scaffolds is all about, providing sort of a shift in responsibility from the teacher to the student, and having more and more responsibility on the student so that they become more independent. And so what it really means is you're first initially focusing on the lesson, and so you are doing it for the students, then you're sort of guiding instruction, and in that way you guys are all doing it, students and teacher. Then it becomes a little bit more collaborative and the students do it together. And then finally at the end the student does it alone, and in that way it becomes more independent. I think it's extremely important to note and emphasize that scaffolds, again, are meant to be temporary structures to facilitate learning. They're not meant to stay forever. And again, it goes hand in hand with gradual release, which is really just to provide more independence for the student and more understanding, to be able to move those sort of zone of proximal development skills and be able to move them more to their independent zone, independent working zone. And then it's also important to know that effective scaffolds, again, need to be gradually dismantled to avoid any dependency. But then also it's important to provide appropriate balance of sort of gradually removing these scaffolds to avoid error in learning. Essentially, what scaffolding does is it provides errorless teaching or errorless learning for the students, where they provide a response that is correct, as opposed to practicing or responding in an incorrect manner and then learning that incorrect response from the beginning. So that's essentially the purpose of scaffolds, to provide that support in correct responding. So if anyone happens to have any questions after watching this, or any comments, please feel free to contact me directly to my email address. Thank you so much for watching, and happy scaffolding.